Festcast, die gesprochene Festschrift für Professor Dr. Constanze Jungblut.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Festcast for Professor Constanze Jungblut. As many of you will know, the German-speaking academic community has a long tradition of honoring a retiring professor by putting together a Festschrift, a large-ish collection of papers written by their academic contemporaries. My colleague Rita Valentin and I, both former PhD students with Constanze, aim to bring this beautiful tradition into the 21st century by inviting Constanze's colleagues to a conversation about their academic journey and Constanze's place in it. A Festcast instead of a Festschrift to celebrate Constanze's focus on languages as they are actually spoken and to showcase the many languages and varieties Constanze has worked with and in. Today, I'm honored and pleased to be sharing this Festcast episode with an eminent scholar working in pragmatics. Professoressa Federica da Milano is professor of glottology and linguistics at the Università degli Studi di Milano Bicocca in Milano, Italy. Ciao, Federica.
Ciao, Concha. Thank you for inviting me for this very unusual and funny way to celebrate Constanze.
I'm very, very happy that you made the time for this today. Maybe we start by you telling us a little bit about how you first met Constanze.
Yeah, I know Constanze since the end of 1999 and 2000, beginning of 2000. I met her personally in Erfurt when she was there, but I've heard of her before, of course, because when I started my PhD in Italy at the University of Pavia, Paolo Ramat, who was my supervisor, gave me as the very first thing to read an handout that Constanze presented during a conference in Germany, and where Paolo was, and he listened to her, and he told me, this is a very interesting way of addressing deixis. So please have a look at this handout, and we can discuss later about your dissertation. And the abstract of the handout, of course, was in German, and I didn't know German, of course.
I was going to ask about the language.
German, but not speaking very fluently in German. And so I had to translate the handout, but it was a very surprise for me because the approach of Constanze, based on the notion of dyad of conversation, was very intriguing and for me very interesting and useful in order to analyze demonstrative systems. And then when I had to spend some time abroad for my PhD, I decided to go in Leipzig before at the Max Planck Institute, and then to Erfurt, where Constanze was in that moment. And that's where I met Constanze for my first time, and it was a pleasure and the beginning of a very interesting, challenging, and very interesting relationship, not just from an academic viewpoint, because Constanze is not just a very important and relevant professor, but also a very nice person, and you know, of course.
She is, yes. Wow. And what did you, so when you met in Erfurt, what did you then, did you start working together, or was she advising you, or how did that What happened?
Yeah, I was a young scholar then. I had, I think, 25 years. I was 25 years old. And Constanze for me was the name, a big name in an handout, professor, and etc. And so at the beginning, I was very shy and approaching her, but of course she is so nice, and she was smiling every time, and it was not difficult to interact with her, of course. And we met, I don't remember exactly if once or twice a week, and I gave her my written text, my chapters, the stuff that I wrote before, and we discuss about the topic. And the topic of my PhD dissertation was demonstrative systems in the languages of Europe from a typological viewpoint. And I adopted, in my research, I adopted the approach of Constanze based on the dyad of conversation.
Very nice, very nice. And then did you straight away, because I mean, one thing that we will have to speak about at some point is the manual of Romance Deixis, of course. But were there other projects before, or how did you start collaborating on shared interests?
Yeah, we collaborate also on, basically our main topic of research was, of course, Deixis. We met also during different international pragmatic association conferences all over the world. Also, also once, and I know that Constanze remember well this conference because she liked the place in Riva del Garda in Italy, very long time ago. And then we met at different conferences. She gave me her book, of course, in German, of course.
Another one.
And and then I met her again in Tübingen for another conference. I remember that we had a nice walking trip in the nearby of Tübingen. And also, again, always speaking about Deixis and another stuff. And then I remember one of the most beautiful period of my life was in Brazil with Constanze. For a conference in Florianopolis. But before, for 2 or 3 weeks in Niterói, because as you know, of course, at the University of Viadrina, there is a relationship with UFI, the Universidade Federal Fluminense in Niterói. And we spent there some time because we had a small course in Niterói, and we spent different very, very nice days in Rio de Janeiro, and doing also some stand-up paddling. Constanze also gave me my first lesson of stand-up paddling. Yeah.
Was Constanze an expert in stand-up paddling already?
Yeah, of course.
Wow.
There in front of Niterói, in the sea in front of Niterói, and we shared this fantastic sport together.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And then, of course, and then we had also this big work together, the Manual of Deixis in Romance Languages, and it was very nice and not difficult, as you can imagine, because when you have to collect different chapters from different people all over the world working on the same topic, is not easy at all, and you can go crazy. But with Constanze, everything was fine because we were together in contact. Constanze she's very, she's, as I can imagine, well, she's a workaholic. So she's every time she's in the point, she follows every step of the process. And and we have this project together, a very big project together. And my name is with the name of Constanze in the front cover of this very important.
As it should be.
And this very important handbook. And then we work also together on that's also in the topic of our dialogues in Niteroi, the other project about social markers and social address systems in Romance languages for another handbook edited by Martin Meiden and Adam Lageway of the Cambridge University Press.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Yes, so many projects together. And I mean, of course, so there's this obvious overlap in the work of Deixis. Are there other aspects of Constanze's research that you find interesting or inspiring, or perhaps a way of working, of doing things?
Yeah, of course, I liked a lot, I appreciate a lot the interest of Constanze in Romance languages in general, for example, in Catalan, in particular, because Constanze can speak fluently in Catalan, and I love the approach she has in order to work with Romance languages. And I'm very curious also about this different topic related to African languages and Creoles, and this part of his work. I'm not involved directly in this project with Constanze, but I think it's another important project of Constanze.
It is, certainly, yes. Now, sort of at the end of her professorship, as she moves into to become an emerita, and we touched on this a little bit before the recording, and I said that legacy is a really big word, and then you said that there was a lot of it. So maybe I would like you to now invite you to speak about where you see Constanze's legacy.
Yeah, wow, a big question. I think that Constanze has been for me an important person from very different viewpoints, not just from an academic point of view. Of course, this was my first approach with Constanze, and I learned from Constanze a way to approach pragmatic phenomena that are not very easy to approach, because of course Deixis is, for example, one of among many topics in pragmatics that are very complex to study from a different viewpoint, from a multimodal perspective. Constanze also worked on multimodality, etc. I learned how to organize also many meetings and relate, and how to relate with different people of different ages. For example, I appreciate a lot how Constanze have relationship with PhD, with young students, but also with big and older professor. And also I appreciate a lot the humanity and the sympathy of Constanze, the empathic way of find just from the beginning a way to relate with other people. The way she has always a positive approach to life, and yes, very, very many things. It's difficult to but yeah, I think that Constanze has a lot to teach, and again, even if in another position as an emeritus, an emerita, not just from a scientific viewpoint, a methodological also viewpoint, because I think that Constanze has a very interesting, and from this point of view, a German way of approaching stuff, and not Catalan in this way, but more German, but also a big heart and a lot of humanity to teach to other people. Yeah,
she does. And you mentioned earlier that it's also remarkable what she has achieved as a woman. Would you like to maybe go back to that and explain what you mean with that a little bit?
Yeah, because I had the opportunity to know Constanze also in her family, among his children. Yeah, they are not already, they are boys, but I had the lucky of living with Constanze, with Jürgen and the young boy of Constanze, and I had the opportunity to see how she can manage the big the profession, the roles she had at the university, especially in Viadrina, but also the role of mother, of a wife, of a grandmother also now.
Yes.
Yeah. And and I had this very beautiful occasion, and I remember when I was invited to her birthday, the 60th birthday of Constanze, where her very big family with different people. Also, I remember there I met her mother and her father. Unfortunately, yeah. Very nice person, and I knew how Constanze, where Constanze was born, and I can imagine where Constanze was from, and also from a human viewpoint and a woman viewpoint, I think Constanze is a very, very nice person.
She's a very nice person, and she has basically squared the circle of this superhuman feat of having such a successful career and everything else at the same time.
And she also I would like also to talk about a little bit, just 2 words about our hiking in the Alps, because Constanze went in Italy in the Alps, and it was so nice for me to show Constanze the mountains, the Alps, and doing some hiking, looking at the butterflies, for example, in a nice walk close to Aosta, where she was with Jürgen, and also I would like to also to remember all this hiking together.
Yes. So it's the career, the family, and the other beautiful things in life that Constanze always makes sure to notice and to enjoy, which is quite remarkable, really.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
it has
you,
been insightful and heartwarming, and I look forward to seeing you soon.